Thank you. Thanks for coming. Now, what I want to do today is start off by talking to you about why it matters, this question: has science relegated the Bible to myth? And as a Christian, I just want to explain very briefly one of the chief claims of the gospel using a Bible passage that indicates why we think it's really important to work this out and to consider the claims of the Bible. So we've got a passage up there on the screen that will come up. This is Mark chapter 4, and I'll read it out to you. And I'll talk about some of the implications from a Christian perspective on life, reality, the world, you and I and God. So it says there, that day when evening came, this is Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion, and the disciples woke him and said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And they were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Now, why we think this question matters, has science relegated the Bible to myth, is because we think as Christians there are certain truth claims in the Bible which are as true as they are extraordinary. They're extraordinary even in the time that they reportedly happened. So here we have a bunch of Jesus' closest followers who've been walking around with him. Jesus, who is an historical figure, who is, the general consensus is, from Christians and non-Christians alike, is that there was a person called Jesus. He reputedly did miracles. He was a very wise teacher. We have some of his writings and sayings today. He had a massive impact on humanity, society, religion. So there is this guy called Jesus, and here he is, back in the first century with his closest disciples, and he performs this extraordinary miracle where they've got the storm, and they fear, they're going to drown, and he just with a word silences the wind and the waves. And they're terrified. They've been walking around with him, good friends, and they just think this is extraordinary. This is unprecedented. Who is this man? Even the wind and the waves obey him. And what Christianity claims is that something extraordinary has happened in history, in time and space, that is testified to by humanity and by history, and which is testified to God through miracles. Something happened which is God revealing himself to humanity. God entering into our world and saying, "I am here, I care, I am powerful." There is a meta-narrative, there is a metaphysical explanation for everything. All these suspicions you have, all these questions you have, they can be answered. This is what Christianity is claiming to do, that in the miraculous revelation of Christ, which is unprecedented, which is extraordinary, which is unusual, which is phenomenal, which is freaking people out even at the present day, we have God speaking to us. And in that gospel, the Gospel of Mark, and in the other Gospels, we see God in man, making God known to humanity, but more than that, dealing with some of the big themes of human existence: evil, sin, suffering, morality, meaning, purpose. He lives, he shows us how to live as a human being ought to live under God, and he dies at the cross, revealing that God actually does love his creation. And along the way, he demonstrates through this revelation of God in man, Jesus Christ, that God has this kind of power over creation. Even the wind and the waves obey. There is a metaphysical explanation. There is a God who sustains, rules over everything. That's what this story is demonstrating. So why does this matter? Well, the famous scientist who's now dead, Stephen Jay Gould, who was a paleontologist, evolutionary biologist, historian of science, and a great popularizer of science. This is what he wrote about the limits of science. Our failure to discern a universal good does not record any lack of insight or ingenuity, but merely demonstrates that nature contains no moral messages framed in human terms. Morality is a subject for philosophers, theologians, students of the humanities, indeed for all thinking people. The answers will not be read passively from nature. They do not and cannot arise from the data of science. The factual state of the world does not teach us how we, with our powers for good and evil, should alter or preserve it in the most ethical manner. And he's just saying something which a lot of scientists say, is that science is very powerful, it is very effective, but it has parameters, it has limits, it has a context in which it works well, but it doesn't work beyond that. Philosophically, it's impossible for it to work beyond that. That's what he's saying, as a scientist, not as a Christian. And what we're saying, as Christians, and what we're saying in light of the historicity of the Bible, what we're saying in light of the claims that God has revealed himself in the Bible, is that there is something, there is a way of answering these questions philosophically, theologically, through revelation by God. And what's more, Jesus here in the Gospels, probably, as I said, came to deal with our deepest problems, evil, sin, death, issues of the struggle we have with morality, understanding what morality is, relationship with God. And here in this demonstration of power of the wind and the waves, it's tapping in also to a popular mythology in Jewish culture, that the chaos of the ocean represents evil and disorder in the world. And here we have Jesus saying, "Be still." He's come to conquer disorder, chaos, sin, evil in the world. So that's just a brief intro to why this question matters. We believe that there is a serious claim from the Bible, from Christianity, that God has revealed himself in history, in time and space, to answer questions which science just could not possibly answer. So it's a relevant question, it's an important question to matter. So now we'll just get into the questions proper on the issue at hand. Has science relegated the Bible to myth? And I thought it would be helpful as a way in to just deal particularly perhaps with the Noah's Ark story, and what was just presented there by Bill Nye. Last week we did this as well on a different topic, and it got abstracted pretty quickly. So this week I'm not going to tell you my meta thinking on how I approach the subject. I will get there, but what we're going to do first is just start with questions and just work at that level and see how we go. Okay, so any questions from the floor? If not, I'll answer some questions that I got texted in last night on this broader topic to give you time to think. But if you've got any questions, it'd be great. Tom here is going to be the roaming mic guy.
Yeah, you don't want me to run around the mic for too long, so you should ask some questions.
Yeah. Any question you want?
I don't know. You can not answer this if you don't want to.
Okay.
Does the Bible support science? We always go over the whole point of science disproving the Bible, putting the Bible related to land and mythology.
Yes.
But as I say, is the Bible pro and for science? Like, information.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so is the Bible, is Christianity pro-science? Yeah, you might be led to believe that it isn't, that they're fundamentally opposed to one another. But that's not the case, and historically it's not the case. So historically there's a strong argument that the sciences, as we know them today, grew out of theology. And in fact, it's interesting that the age of reason, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, all that kind of stuff, began with largely with the Protestant Reformation. So the Roman Catholic Church had a lot of power as a church and politically, and the Reformers were a bunch of Christians who were looking at the Bible and saying the official church line, the official church teaching actually isn't lining up with the Bible, with the documents. And so it started this sort of bottom-up movement to look at the, if you like, empirical data to question the top-down teaching. And that sort of began this whole movement of sort of bottom-up reading the data, which did actually kick off or add fuel to this age of reason, which eventually led to humanism, which is very much this view that it's all about looking at the data from the bottom up, not just accepting things from the top down, because there seems to be some sort of authority structure there. So what I'm saying there is that it's sort of a theological movement in the beginning that started this sort of bottom-up movement, which really added fuel to science, arguably. And traditionally, it's understood that they're complementary sciences. Theology was called the Queen of the Sciences, and that's because theology can give us the presuppositions which make science make sense. So the idea that there are kind of laws and constants and an explorable design in the world, that all complements the idea that there's a God who made it as such and who is a constant and provides constancy to creation. Yeah.
More questions?
Yes, Rishma? Do you need a mic? Or you right?
Well, I think it'll be alright.
Too late.
No. Okay, so this is also broad. But is it possible for a Christian to also adhere to evolution and the evolutionary sort of theory?
Well, they do, so yes.
But, would you be able to expand on that at all?
Not a whole lot, because I, on this whole issue, as you'll see as we progress today, am agnostic on this. I do not know. My view is I just take science as science and theology is theology, and I think there are several ways you can proceed with apparent contradictions, and I believe there are apparent contradictions in the biblical text, and clashing with what science says about the origin of the universe, all that kind of stuff, the origins of humanity and the earth. Theistic evolutionists, people who see that there's a clear harmonisation or a clear way to harmonise evolutionary explanations with what the Bible says about how everything began. I'm not convinced of that, but then I don't really know enough about it to be able to weigh that up. I think there are lots of questions about that. Evolution, for instance, requires death. So what's going on there when the Bible says that death ended the world through sin, all that kind of stuff. But I know that there are answers to that question. So is theistic evolution possible? Ask the theistic evolutionists. Can people believe in evolution and be Christians? Yes, because they are. Do I know if it harmonises beautifully? No, I do not know. To me, it seems tough to make it harmonise.
Any more questions?
How did 14,000 animals fit on the boat?
40,000, wasn't it?
14,000
animals.
One more.
Yeah. Well, the creation science answer is that there weren't 14,000 animals. What's the? Do you know the figure?
The ark was 120 meters wide. 20 metres, like 14 metres high, so there was, whoever was more than enough space in the art for there to be 14 metres.
Yeah, so my answer here is that there was enough space. Look, yeah. I basically buy, I mean, me and Tommy disagree on this, but which is, I'm just sort of saying that because we're sort of eyeballing each other, but yeah, you know, Bill Nye's kind of basic takedown of Noah's Ark, I pretty much accept that. I think reasonably, like rationally, just gathering the scientific data, it seemed utterly implausible, the ark. If you're just looking at it from a naturalistic explanation point of view, I would agree that the ark is it's clearly implausible. I mean, even when I was talking about, you know, being able to build a boat that would even float of that size, and that Noah would do it with his family. I mean, how on earth did he do that? Just him. It is incredible. Yeah. So just to give a short answer to that, I think we are basically looking at ambiguities in the text, but there are lots of ways of dealing with the apparent contradiction or clash. It may have to do with the ambiguities in the text. The text may not be saying exactly what we think it's saying. It may be a supernatural explanation involved, which I think philosophically completely possible, and I think that scientism discounts that and shouldn't. So I think there are lots of ways of dealing with the apparent contradiction. Yeah, but I think we should let science be science. You know. Yeah. I feel that wasn't as clear as it should be. Do you want to come back at that? Or does anyone want to come back at that?
So everyone else died.
Sorry?
It was a global flood. So everyone else is dead, I assume. Like all the other people died.
Yeah, well, on face value, that's exactly right. Yeah. So there's this worldwide flood. Everyone dies except Noah. And then the flood subsides, and yeah, he starts again, and he starts fresh. Yeah. Does the scientific data support that? I would say no. Well, there are lots of reasons why I think you would say no. I mean, the fact that, they you know, Bill Nye would argue, I think it's and a lot of other scientists would argue that this is evidence for that kind of catastrophe. We know if you look up that debate on YouTube, we know, for instance, that there are trees that are older than young Earth creationists say the world is. Like there are trees that are older than young Earth creationists claim the world is. There's just lots of things that you can point to that seems to indicate that the world is a lot older than young Earth creation depiction of events, and that a lot of these sort of stories at face value just don't match up with the empirical data. Yeah. So yeah. Yep. Okay.
So what do you do with it? So
Yeah.
How do you hold Noah?
Yes.
What do you do?
Yeah. Okay. Well. Let's go to the next slide then, and I'll talk to you about what I think. What is taken into consideration when we look at something like Noah. So there are sort of three fields or three areas of thinking that all have to intersect when you're looking at something like Noah's Ark. The first is science, with the how questions. Is this possible? How could it happen? Is it likely to have happened? And there's a philosophical question, why would it have happened? Or, philosophy is kind of that, basically asking the question why. what's the purpose of things, how does things make sense, all that kind of stuff. And then the history questions, what has happened in the past. So this is what I want to say about Noah's Ark, according to those three spheres of knowledge or sciences. First of all, how do things work? How do things happen? Is it possible? No, I think just based on the empirical data, empirical observation, the Noah's Ark event seems highly improbable. It's not impossible. Never, I don't think you ever say that, but it's just highly improbable. You wouldn't want to say it's supported by science, particularly. Philosophically, is it possible that the reading of the data is counterintuitive? That is the scientific way of assessing Noah's Ark. Is that the only way it can be assessed? Is that the only reliable way it can be assessed? Philosophically, I think you have to say no. For instance, there are other presuppositions that we could argue for quite strongly based on, for instance, science, history. So, if there is a God, if we presuppose there is a God, if we presuppose the God of the Bible, instantly we have the category of the supernatural, the miraculous opens up before us. And so it is, therefore, if there's some other reason to take that as serious, this revelation of God in the Bible, there is an alternative explanation for the data that's counterintuitive. So yes, so it is completely counterintuitive from a naturalistic explanation of things for there to be this ark, to be that big, to have that many animals, to be able to float, that no one could build it. Do you know what I mean? That seems to go against all the data we have. There is a counterintuitive explanation. That is that God did it. It was a supernatural intervention into the natural order of things. That comes into play. That's a philosophical question. Is there a presupposition that might change the way we view science? And thirdly, historically, what has happened? And for me, this is a really powerful thing, a powerful science or a powerful field of knowledge, which is really overlooked and not treated with seriousness of respect by people like the New Atheists, like people like Bill Nye. There is a lot of historical credibility to the Bible. The Bible historically is to be reckoned with. There are lots of questions it raises historically that need to be answered, that aren't answered easily by this is a myth, or this is legend, or it's Chinese whispers. Constantly hear New Atheists say, what do you believe? The empirical sciences, or this book that's been translated countless times, it's been passed on from generation to generation. And what that's giving away there is that they have not understood or looked into the Bible as a document at all seriously. They have not actually considered the historical, philosophical arguments for the Bible as a revelation from God. They haven't reckoned with it at all. So that is to be taken seriously. So here are these sort of three different sciences, there's three different areas of knowledge which need to be taken into consideration. So I'm quite comfortable with saying, from just a scientific, purely from a scientific point of view, a naturalistic explanation point of view, that the Noah's Ark seems incredibly improbable and likely didn't happen. If that's all you had, I would agree it didn't happen. But we have history, we have philosophy. And I therefore say it did happen. I don't exactly know what happened historically. We know enough historically to know that something likely happened. Precise details of it, we don't know enough from the historical narrative to know. But I'm quite sure it did happen from a philosophical, historical point of view. So let's just go to the next slide. Here I think the possibilities, for instance, with Noah's Ark, and this might be followed by more questions. Firstly, one solution is that science is wrong because Genesis is the best explanation of the data. This is the young Earth creation science argument. That is, that the very best explanation of the data that we have from an empirical science point of view is exactly as the Bible describes it. between 6 and 10,000 years old, Noah's Ark global, all this kind of stuff. And science has just got it wrong. They've just misread the data. The second possibility is that science is wrong because there is a counterintuitive explanation of the data. That is, yes, well, according to this sort of starting assumption, there are no assumptions and we're just going off the data. Yes, the flood may seem completely unlikely, six-day creation may seem completely unlikely, but is there some other information we have that would cause us to investigate a counterintuitive explanation of the data? For instance, on another issue, science, in this sort of argument about the age of the Earth, in creation science, people often present the argument, what about the speed of light, in fact, that we can see, stars millions of light years away. How can it possibly support the idea that the world is only a matter of 1,000 years old? The light just would not physically have had the time to reach us such that we can see those stars. And if you're just thinking from a naturalistic scientific point of view, the starting assumptions, there are no assumptions, we're just going for the data. Yes, that's correct. It could not possibly be from a naturalistic explanation of the world, 6 to 10,000 years old. But if you presuppose that there is a God who could just speak things into being, it says in Genesis, for instance, that he said there was a light before the sun even turns up, right, in the Genesis account. If we presuppose there was a God who can just do that, put light there, and then connect it to the source and, where it lands, there's actually a counterintuitive explanation, therefore, of the data. Do you get what I'm saying? Because of that credible supernatural presupposition. So this is the second point. Thirdly, the Bible is untrue. It's just not reliable or credible. Fourth, the Bible is being misread. Fifthly, I don't know, but I take both at face value for different reasons. Okay, so I think there's sort of 5 different ways to approach the problem of Noah's Ark. The ones that I don't think you can take personally is number 1, science is wrong because Genesis is the best explanation of the data. I don't think that's a credible answer. And nor do I think 3 is. The Bible is untrue. I think 2, 4, 5 are all real possibilities. There could be a counterintuitive explanation of that. The Bible could be being misread. There's a common and popular argument that Noah's flood is a local flood, and it's completely plausible when you take into account the historical context. So, to the known world, there was a flood at that time. There are similar flood narratives in ancient Near Eastern literature too, around the same time, that are similar to the Genesis flood event, which would actually point to there have been some sort of natural phenomena that caused that. So that's a very plausible explanation. We're just misreading the Bible. We're assuming it is this global flood, when really it's just saying it's the known world. But fifthly, I don't know, but I take both at face value for different reasons. That's my preferred option. I think that the Bible has to be taken on its own terms. There's a lot of credibility. There are lots of reasons to trust in the power and the authenticity, the integrity of the Bible. And I think there's also a lot of reasons just to take the natural sciences as credible and authentic. Okay? So any questions on that? Does that clarify that?
The least convincing talking about it.
I sort of have a question. How far can you push the counterintuitive explanation of the data? Like, can we then say the reason there's no fossils of kangaroos between Asia and Australia is because God just zapped them all up? Like, can we say things like that?
Well, I think you can theoretically, but that I get your point, and it is unlikely. That's right. But I mean, that's not the end of the story. I mean, that's, you know, I think that there are lots of questions you can ask of evolution, and there are lots of questions you can ask of, you know, the Bible's explanation of what has happened historically. So, there being no fossils found of kangaroos, and they're coming down to Australia, yeah, that may be, I think, a legitimate glitch in kind of a straight reading of Noah's Ark, even if you're going to use the counterintuitive explanation. But it doesn't knock down and refute it. Yeah, we talk about the best explanation of the data. So it could still be, there could still be a counterintuitive, solid explanation for the natural data, even with questions that can still be raised of that. Do you get what I'm saying? So I think when it's coming to this kind of stuff, you know, evolution and what has happened in the past historically, yeah, I don't think you could ever knock down a theory on a couple of pictures here and there. Listen to what, this might be a good point to introduce what Darwin said of his own theory of evolution. This is in a book, Why God Won't Go Away, which I recommend, by Alistair McGrath. He's talking about the question of proof and the sciences and so on. And he makes this point that Darwin himself knew that in his own kind of explanation of the origin of the species, there were lots and lots of questions that remain unanswered. And towards the end of his book, Origin of the Species, he says this: a crowd of difficulties will have occurred to the reader. Some of them are so grave that to this day I can never reflect on them without being staggered. But to the best of my judgment, the greater number are only apparent, and those that are real are not, I think, fatal to my theory. So here he is saying, you know, the theory of evolution has the most explanatory power for the data we see, and yet there are lots of questions and objections people can raise, and many he didn't quite know the answer to. But nonetheless, has the best explanatory power. Yeah. So in any kind of explanation, there's going to be, you know, we're talking about fairly deep history like that. Yeah.
What do you think about the theory that God made the Earth 6,000 years ago, but he made it to look like an old Earth?
Well, it begs the question, why? What, was he just wanting to fool us so that we would trust in his revelation and not trust in humanistic thinking? Or was that what was going on? I don't know. Was it like a powerful illusion to fool those who want? It just begs the question, why would he do that? I guess it's theoretically possible, but it doesn't. But you know, that doesn't really. I think that just sort of makes the point, really, that empirical science is coming up with the best explanation of data. So if God made the world to look old, much, much, much older than it actually is, I think that validates the empirical science of view that does look old. That's all they're saying. It's saying the world looks billions of years old. The universe looks many billions of years older than that. That's what it looks like to us. And so we're going to stick with that theory until there's a really good reason to believe otherwise. Yeah. But I think that where science oversteps the mark is just disregarding the philosophical question of presuppositions and the historical questions that is raised by the Bible and Christian claims.
Probably
No,
sorry. I was going to say, probably got time for one more question.
Yeah. Scientific empiricism, it it oversteps the mark and says everything has to be, so like the only true way of knowing stuff truly is through the empirical sciences. I think it is fairly obviously overstepping the mark. Okay?
Can I actually think that non-scientists hold that belief that science has the answer to all the questions.
Yeah.
The scientists from within, you go, man, I don't have a lot of answers. So my take is that there are lots of scientists who are Christians because they're going, yeah, well, my research is about this wide in the whole breadth of knowledge, and I just don't have answers for a whole stack of things. But I think sometimes that people look from the outside in on science and say, it, over there, it has all the answers.
Yes.
Which is where the overstepping happens. I think from within there are also those who clearly overstep. But I think it's very common from outside as well.
Yes. Yeah, a friend of mine observed, who works at the university campus, another part of Australia, observed that the people who've got the biggest problem with the science-Christianity clash from the Christian community perspective are the art students, not the scientists. Like he observed that. It's the art students who are most concerned about the clash between science and Christianity. The science, like within the field, there is an understanding often that science just can't answer some questions, and that it's working on this best explanation of the data as it presents, and that raises a whole lot of other possibilities for counterintuitive explanations and other sort of fields and what we have to take into account. That sort of is a good segue into Francis Collins' quote. He says, he's a pretty well-known scientist, previously head of the Human Genome Project. And he talks about this wonderful harmony between science and Christianity. He says, I have found there is a wonderful harmony in the complementary truths of science and faith. The God of the Bible is also the God of the genome. God can be found in the cathedral or in the laboratory. By investigating God's majestic and awesome creation, science can actually be a means of worship. He talks about being thoroughly convinced of both, like through his work on the Human Genome Project. He said, I've never been more convinced of the evolutionary power to explain things as they are. But I'm also constantly staggered at the power and might of God and what an incredible universe He's made. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, so unfortunately that's all we've got time for. I'd like to firstly thank all the people that presented at God Talks this semester. So Stu yourself, Catherine Fletcher, Tom Larson, Simon Angus, Graham Chiswell, Tim Grant, Murray Campbell and David Chiswell. That's all for God Talks. Thank you everyone for coming today. And for those that are here for the first time as well, thank you. What can we do now? You can chat to the person next to you, or come and chat to Stu, meet up with a coffee with someone, or you can check out the websites that are on your hand, Public Christianity and Reasonable Faith. They've got a lot of answers to a lot of the questions that people ask for Christians. So do check that out. Otherwise, that's it. We wish you all the best for exams and assessments. And yeah, have a good day. Thanks for coming.